I'm here in Los Angeles with Max Presneill, who was one of the first artists I actually interviewed on this project in 2012. Yeah. And we caught up recently in Brisbane to discuss your show there. And I'm just now catching up with you again in 360 degrees. Turn around, you can see the trolley return.
Trolleys and everything.
Let's get going.
We're in Pasadena right now, and now we're heading downtown Los Angeles.
Okay, so where is your work at the moment now, 6 months after the show? Did you go through that usual kind of, slump that people go through?
I didn't go through a slump from that. I've been doing this long enough to know that there's always going to be that post-show low. And so I always make sure of things to do and ways of moving along without getting stuck by it, which I'd advise everyone to do. Make sure you understand that's going to happen. But no, that was fine, and I've been still active. I had some work in the show in Tokyo, and I've got a show up in Los Angeles at the moment, and I'm in a show in Berlin at the moment.
Wow! So these are group shows,
Yeah, I mean, my next solo show will be, I think it's with my Beverly Hills gallery. Anyway, so that was all fine, and stuff continues as it normally does. I normally have work up in any given time in 2 or 3 different venues. Somewhere, which is lovely. Quite happy about it. But no, I didn't have that kind of slump thing. One keeps busy, and there's more things coming, and you have to work constantly towards the future and what's going to be next. For me, next, that's going to be, there's a couple of shows in Los Angeles. It's about time to start talking to my gallery about the solo show with the Beverly Hills guys, like I said. There's shows coming up in Oslo, Rome, and in Greece, and China. So those are things that will be coming along next year. So I have to prepare for those and decide what's going to go out and what I want to be presenting there.
So are these kind of 1 or 2 works in each show?
For the group ones, only 1 or 2. The solo shows depends on the size of the venue. But there's also there's a gallery that's in Beijing and in Los Angeles who are interested in taking some works to the art fair. So there'll be multiple pieces. They'll go with them. And so there's a lot of those kind of discussions. You have to make a lot of work so you have something to choose from, because most of it doesn't go. Most of it doesn't leave the studio, unfortunately. All that kind of stuff's in development and on its way. I know there's enough shows coming up to keep me busy for the next couple of years. The most significant thing is what we were talking about last night, which is a slight refocus from where I was talking about the art as the activity itself as being a political position in actually making art at all, and that the mark making process is one of oppression and suppression, and how that can be seen in wider general terms of political situations. And then the kind of what's arisen recently is how to get the works to talk more about what fake news might mean. And that means that plays into a wider discussion about what reality is and who informs us of what and why we believe and how society decides what it's going to be. We're going to come off here. As well as the direct political ramifications and the ideas of how fake news is a way of dispelling the belief in sources, which is the first step of tyranny. This kind of way of thinking, well, if you can't trust anything, then you believe anything.
when you first started going down this route of doing the redact paintings, which, you know, as you've said before, you know, about the politics of politics and aesthetics, really.
Yeah.
This was pre, you know, Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, it's pre.
So there's a kind of there's a vitality to the project that has arisen out of the, you know, out of the political situation, really, from, you know,
Trump just makes it more acute.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is all governments and all forms of society are about levels of control. They have to be by design. I mean, we all have to live together. We have to have some rules to agree by, and one, I think, needs to be really aware that democracy is fragile.
Yeah.
And that history is very good at showing us how easily it can dissipate into forms of tyranny. Germany, was the great example, but it's true of lots of societies, and we can see the erosion of liberty and the erosion of rights and the erosion of even the ability to speak with comfort out loud because of those kind of subtle pressures. I mean, these are things that all societies live with, and it only takes a little tiny couple of movements before people start self-censoring what they're going to say, before the government says, we really need to make sure that only people that should be voting should vote, so let's pass a law that's what it's for. But when the reality is, what it does is say, you have to register in these methods. Well, if you're poor, you might not have access to those methods or the money.
Yeah.
In which case you've disenfranchised a large portion of the people who are the poorest, which enables political parties to only aim at the wealthier end, because who cares about them? They're not voting. We've made sure they can't vote.
Yeah.
And that just stacks the deck in terms of the corporate world. I'm simplifying it down to near stupidity, but I mean, essentially that's what it does. And the long-term kind of understanding of that is people become meaningless. It's all about money. It's about giving the shareholders, and the rich get richer, the poor gets shafted. And that's not good for anyone.
So going back to, you were saying about it's almost like like a modernist sort of search for authenticity that comes with the materiality of painting that you're talking about.
Well, I think it's important to understand that contemporary art there is a difference between contemporary and modern, but the core themes are about being human.
Yeah.
And you don't lose any of that because you're contemporary. Yeah. You're still searching. If one is interested in perhaps more difficult and deeper questions, then you are going to be, in one way or another, particularly now with the political situations around the world, you're going to have to engage with that. Even if it's obliquely, you're still engaging with these issues because they're the discussion of your time. We make art that's the most relevant that we can, and part of that is we talk to each other about the things that are important. What's important amongst most people I know right now is, what does the current moment hold for civil rights, our liberties, our individual ability to speak and to move, and what's the role of art in relationship to these kind of things, and how do we ensure that the things that we hold dear, democracy, freedom, autonomy, those kind of aspects don't disappear when they are self-evidently being attacked.
Do you find, or do you think maybe that if you'd stayed with the figurative foundation of your paintings a few years ago, that it might have been easier to have dealt with these issues?
I think it's easier for a simple reading, because you can kind of illustrate, here's the person doing this. And that's true, but I'm looking for, I guess in some ways I'm looking for more philosophical approaches to it rather than specific. And the problem before was people would say, oh look, that's this. And then that would be the end of they found it out, they've seen it now, and they understand that to mean this. Well, if one wants to talk with real complexity, it's this and this and this and this. And you need to leave the conversation open enough for them to say, well, it could be this and it could be this, but it could also be this or this. And maybe it's all of those. And I just found that the figurative elements cut the conversation off too quickly. It made it it tended for the viewer to say, oh, it's about that, because I recognise that person, or I recognise that historical figure, or whatever it might be. And so now I understand. I've got the answer. And no, you didn't. Those figures were only metaphors for wider discussions about the nature of, political agency. So what I found is that the abstract approach allows a much wider reading, although it's more difficult because you have to start really, for the viewer, you have to work harder. To get to, or at least to work harder in looking at what you've got in front of you and saying, well, is it this, or is it more this, or does it work well as this for me? Or and which part of these things are just me, or maybe the paint's telling me more, and it's just a little harder job. Which is, I don't make art for simple illustration of an idea to make life easy for somebody. I want to make art that's trying to engage with a more complex idea with my peers. I make work to speak to my peers. So I think that it was interesting because it was it's really difficult to do that move. It's kind of a big step, but now I've done it a couple of times because I've moved. I was an abstract painter, a figurative painter originally, and then I went to abstraction, and then went back to figuration. And I've gone backwards and forwards because you come to a period of time where you've kind of exhausted a train of thought, and then jumping over to the other side, as it were, gives you a fresh impetus to understand it and some of the core themes, because all my paintings are about the same things, but it gives you an ability to refocus it into different areas of the same conversation. The conversation as a general thing is about what does it mean to invest meaning in the world, and how does one do that in political ways, or how does one do it when you talk about the ideas of freedom, autonomy, and individuality, when none of those things are actually simple or direct things, and one might question whether they exist at all in any real meaningful way. And you can do that through art, and you kind of do it with a figurative while, and then pop over to abstraction. It gives you a different take on things. It gives you a different way of, like the Redact series was an attempt to talk directly about oppression. Suppression of information, the hiding of things, the whiting, the kind of whiting out of history, the underdog being excluded in ways, graffiti being covered up, just by mute tones by the council, which I understand why they're doing it, but what it does say is your voice doesn't count. And corporate walls should remain corporate walls, and you have no rights here. And these kind of things that were inherent for me in thinking about the work. And so, I was doing the Redact, and then that's mutating at the moment into the ideas about fake news and real news and real world issues. And at some point, if it's necessary, it starts saying, well, there's specific things that might want to focus on. Then maybe the figure gets reintroduced. And the more times I've done that jump, the easier it gets to go wherever I need to go. Because it is hard for people, I think, to and for me, to make that I'm going to go into this whole new field.
I think moving into abstraction from figuration, I think is very difficult.
I think it was. I mean, I could feel it. There was months leading up to it when I could feel that whole mental change towards it. I knew it was going to happen. It was just when. And I did a version, like a figurative, abstracted version of Jericho's The Raft of Medusa, and I did a bigger one, a life-size one, 16 by 24 feet, and then I did a smaller one, which was only like, 7 by 11 feet or something, and I got really into it, but that was the last figurative work I did. It was just, and I knew it was going to be, while I was doing it. It was like, no, this is the end point of all the work I've been doing for like a few years led to this, and then when it's done, because I started thinking about how do you use abstract means, which are they're involved in that history of abstract art, and they are abstract, but they're also completely literal. It is a mark. It's metaphorical in many ways, and one can argue philosophical points from it, but you're also aware of the dichotomy of it. It's actually absolutely literal too, and so there's a whole bunch of things that abstraction can do, which are complicated because it is this and this. It is like if I would make a mark and then I'd scroll it out, And you say, well, yes, the mark has been oppressed, suppressed, whatever. Yeah, but it was me that did it. So the problem then becomes, well, is this about self-censorship then, or is it like panopticon? You control your own
self-surveillance.
You control your own actions, or is it that you stand in for both the establishment and the individual, because you are part of both. You are society and you are the individual. So this, the marks are continuously very self-aware of their own problems and their own dichotomies and their own limitations. One of the reasons why most of the marks I make have always got some kind of boundary around them is so they're isolated, self-aware that they're imprisoned within their own histories and that they're never actually free. They're never actually what they seem to be. They are examples of, they're literal examples of, or they're literally paint and all these other things. They're always trapped in the discussion, because you have to be self-aware that you're saying this, but you're saying it this way, and that in itself is a position, and it has it has echoes in the world that tell that nothing's as simple as it seems. And I think that abstraction is really good for that kind of stuff. I can talk about these aspects that are kind of wide-ranging. I can approach through the process some of those ideas that I'm really interested in about updated forms of existentialism, not the old forms, new ones that I'm interested in. All these other elements come into play, as much as, say, the history of art, because the technique one uses to lay down paint tells you about the history of art. So you're already engaging with this whole thing about what does it mean. There's a lineage, there's a history. It already deals with this. Colours, certain colours will reference into like historical moments and positions and ideas, and even down to individual paintings. You can reference just by the way you'd lay some paint down. Say, I'm referencing this painting, and that painting has this political, meaning. So there's a reference that I understand my relationship to that painting through the technique and history of the paint. So there's a great deal of self-referential aspects. I actually prefer it as thinking it as more as a as part of this cognitive way of understanding all the relationships of these things together, and if you can. The word self-reflexive is the one. I mean, reflexivity, I think, is the key there, because it's the more you know about these things, the less simple they get, and you can do them, but you're always should be aware of what these other readings are and what these means. I don't want to over-theorize it, because when you're in the studio, you're just doing it. No, but I mean, there's resonances that you're at least partly aware of when you're laying these things down. That that there also there's multiple readings, that there are plausible kind of readings that an audience is going to get from those particular. And you just have to be happy with. Well, it goes a little bit in this direction, and it also says this, and maybe it's also about that. Am I happy with it being all these things? Move ahead. If you're not, it needs to be changed, altered, whatever it might be. But I think some of those. All of these kind of multi-layered, self-reflexive, ways of dealing with cognition and decision-making, and those kind of things, which are like a giant game of chess. These are the elements of not only painting, but what it means to be alive in the world, what it means to be human. These are ultimately the most human aspects of ourselves, and so all this stuff goes into this arena of decisions, because I do tend to think of it as arena. It's a little bit of a battlefield. In there, and you've got you've got the limitations of this, whatever the size you're working to, and in there, then you're really, trying to have this battle with yourself and with ideas and histories and everything at the same time. It's about throwing it in there. I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't. The actual process when you're in the studio is one of contemplation of things as they come up and whatever, but it's far more intuitive than I think. It sounds like when we have this discussion. I mean, you make these things and then you're kind of half figuring it out as you're going along, or we think, hey, I should experiment with that. But you don't know what it's going to be. You just have an insight that maybe it'll deal with some of these things if I do this. And I suppose because of the technique that you're using, painting of the top of what you've got, if you get dead ends, you're just painting it out. My whole thing is that those paintings will get painted over and over and over and over again until somebody pulls it away from me. And then I don't have it anymore, and the gallery has it, or then it's somebody else's deal. But as long as I have it, it's material to be used. That way it enables, because I think if you think of art with a capital A when you're making it, you're holding yourself back. You're finding ways to this is me, this is what I do. If you always think of the work as an experiment, then you can do anything. You can try this and try that, and it leads you down new avenues, and you don't get hobbled by your own aesthetics or your own choice as they appear to be, because you're afraid of this idea. Oh, but I didn't want to mess it up. You can't mess it up. There's no such thing. It's just an artwork. It could go anywhere. You could paint over it and start all over again. There isn't a getting it wrong. There's only a set of things that you decide you learnt from it, and is it the right kind of things? In the end, you can say, "Oh, I'll stop there then." But there's not, if you think that there's a right and a wrong way, and I got it right or I got it wrong, you're already partly in the way of restricting yourself. I think. No, I mean, if you did very super realistic landscapes or figurative work, then maybe that's not quite as true, because that's what it should look like. But then that's illustration, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Who knows?
Thank you very much, Max.
It's all very complicated.